Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And as usual, please do subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with all things Clown Decade. And of course become a channel member. Right, those who aren't aware of my Reacting to Extreme Britain series, Politics Joe do Vox Pops all around the country on different topics. They tend to do once a week, and I effectively go through it to find out what your average Joe blogs thinks and comment on it. This time they are at the Reform conference, where I will be going through two videos, one where they ask left-wing agitators at the Reform conference what they think of Reform, and then they go inside and ask Reform members what they think of Reform 2. So let's get into it.
Birmingham's a city of sanctuary, a hugely multicultural city.
Yeah, well, quite a few people have a problem with that, don't they? Whenever there was an election about would you like it to become more multicultural, i.e. do you want more immigration, resoundingly the answer's always been no. And they got it anyway.
For Nigel Farage and Reform UK, that is a problem.
So they're looking for an answer. The one that's being presented to them, if they just follow mainstream media, is that Nigel Farage is going to be the answer to their concerns.
Sorry, but that is just patently not true, is it? Every time there is a press conference, he is constantly asked, how will you pay for all this? Will you publish your tax returns? You're just not a serious policy with any plans, are you, Mr. Farage? That is the mainstream questioning that he constantly gets. It's not all unfair, by the way. I'm not saying that it's pointless asking these questions, but to act like the mainstream is some sycophantic follower of Nigel Farage is crazy. They were doing that with Starmer before he got elected, and these days they all want him out because he's useless.
Fake party. And this is a party created by multimillionaires for the rich. It's dragged a lot of ordinary people in by saying somehow it's a party of the people. I don't think so.
I always get fed up with that argument as well. Ooh, it's a party made by the rich for the rich. Okay. Frankly, I don't really care as long as they actually deal with the problems we've been voting for years. But as of now, when it comes to Reform's accounts, majority of their money comes from the membership fee of £25. They have over £6 million generated per year from the membership alone. And that's only rising, by the way. The biggest donation they've had is from Nick Candy, who gave £500,000 to Reform. Yeah, sure, he's a millionaire, and yeah, sure, that is a lot of money, but that's not even 10% that's come from a single millionaire, or billionaire, I'm not sure, with Nick Candy. And in total, it probably is 10 to 20%. It's definitely more than 10%, because Zia Youssef also gave £200,000 last year. And there'll obviously be more that, well, if you bother, you can look it up on the Electoral Commission. I believe they keep a record of all donations over £500, so you can actually work it out yourself, but none of these people bothered, so they just say, oh, it's for millionaires, despite the fact it's mostly funded by, yes, ordinary people paying 25 quid, plus they make extra donations to branches and things like that.
Hi, I'm Bob Maloney from Birmingham Stand Up to Racism. We're protesting against the Reform conference because for us, Reform UK are not a legitimate party.
Well, I mean, they are a legitimate party and they are also winning in the polls, so what do you mean by that?
What they're doing is they are here to stir up racial hatred. Farage himself makes veiled comments like, you know, there'll be chaos in society and this sort of thing, which actually is a call for the far right to come out onto the streets.
It's kind of amazing how over this summer we've not really had any riots at all. How the horrible tragedy of Charlie Kirk being assassinated, well, that's what all signs point to at the moment of recording anyway. I recorded this yesterday, by the way, so, you know, if more news comes out, fair enough. But there's been no rioting. In fact, the initial thing I saw was students basically kneeling down for worship and prayer. And, you know, obviously we had the Southport riots last year. Starmer did not deal with it as maybe a leader should have, hence we ended up with riots, and then dealt with it after, and that appears to be quite a popular way to deal with it. This time around, though, Reform, 30-odd% in the polls, looks like there's a way out of it. You know, the Tories actually do something about people, asylum seekers, illegals, whatever, in hotels. There's not really rioting. There's pockets of violence, at worst. Nothing like what we saw with Black Lives Matter over here, I'll say that. And also just the idea that Reform is racist, you know. Keynote speakers, Zia Youssef, brown guy. Plenty of people stood up in the audience and were, what, Jamaican immigrants. You know, there were people from Windrush there saying, I came here, went through the process and built a life here. People are getting in front of me. Well, people like me who want to do that in the future. I don't want that anymore. Bring immigration right down. But that's an argument I've made for 8 years straight. I don't need to go into detail on all that. Anyone from Stand Up to Racism decrying that almost certainly is decrying a group of people who are more diverse than Stand Up to Racism themselves, which is basically full of white people.
So I'm a local Brummie, a local resident, and it's to show that Birmingham rejects racism.
It's hard to tell which of these people are genuinely locals and which are effectively paid to be bussed in to get there. In the case of this particular woman, though, I reckon she is actually a local who is actually hook, line and sinker drinking the leftist Kool-Aid.
Birmingham's a city of sanctuary, a hugely multicultural city, a very vibrant, successful multicultural city. We're also a majority non-white city. In that sense, it's a really enjoyable city to live in with many, many different cultures. That makes the city a wonderful place.
Just bleating the same lines you'd ironically hear all over the mainstream. I will say you're hearing it less and less these days. I think they've had their noses rubbed in all the problems. The BBC are probably the worst offender, but I've noticed Sky getting better on this subject.
They want to reverse this. They believe that the white British population is being replaced. These crazy conspiracy theories that you see across Europe and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, that's just ridiculous thing to push about, especially about the Reform leadership. There might be members who think that, maybe, but there is no way you are getting a quote from anyone in Reform leadership and Reform HQ who've even remotely believed in the Great Replacement theory. They just don't want mass migration anymore, and yeah, they do want an outflow of people that are here, because people don't want illegals and criminals in the country, believe it or not, and if they are native and have nowhere else to go, fair enough, put them in a jail. But the foreign criminals in jail, get rid of them. Obviously.
Well, I'm a member of Stand Up to Racism, and I've been feeling really disheartened by the amount of attacks on refugees in asylum centres and hotels. Last year it became really violent, and I'm worried that that's going to happen again, actually.
Yeah, well, crazy, it didn't. And I think part of the reason for that is that a lot of people do actually hold out hope there's still a political answer to this. There kind of has to be.
The worrying thing, I think, is really that Reform UK officials are now encouraging mobs of people to put siege to hotels where very vulnerable asylum seekers are housed.
Sorry, but lay siege to it? Oh yeah, what we're doing just outside? Yeah, we're just protesting. Do the exact same thing as a righty outside a hotel, you're laying siege to it. Hypocrisy, friend-enemy distinction, call it what you want. These are tactics that aren't working anymore, so at least take a white pill from that.
Recently their officials were photographed standing alongside somebody who's a very well-known, long-standing fascist. In fact, he was the founder member of an organisation called Combat 88, which is a prescribed and very, very violent organisation.
I mean, I tend to keep an eye on the far right in Britain to some extent, but even this is something that I've not heard of before. In fact, having a quick look, Combat 88 appears to have been disbanded in the 80s, so this must have been quite an old guy. I thought he was going to bring up Homeland, but he didn't, because it would be quite difficult to call Homeland violent, to be quite honest with you. They are specifically non-violent, which I've got to give him credit for, of course. But yeah, I've not seen that plastered all over The Guardian, so how true it is or not, I have no idea.
With the hotel protests, we've seen people like Lee Anderson going down to Canary Wharf, to join the far-right protests there.
They don't even think about it. The slur's just thrown out. The far-right protests, it's because they can't really call people Nazis these days. That is definitely a word that's practically become meaningless. And to be honest with you, modern neo-Nazis, they're pretty good at just telling you they're neo-Nazis anyway. And to be fair, I don't think Lee Anderson actually ever turned up at any of the protests. I think he just had a video saying, I've had news that Canary Wharf is going to be getting a migrant hotel. And it did. And a person from there broke into a poor woman's house and she was scared stiff. To the point she got arrested for, in a heightened adrenaline state, not to defend this necessarily. She went out with a meat cleaver effectively to try and find him because she was not happy that the police were not doing anything about it, and in fact let him go on camera. Is that anything to do with Reform, that particular case? No. People are going to find out and protest anyway. Lee Anderson was just saying this is happening in the country. Effectively the Stand Up to Racism position is don't let anyone know, just keep it under wraps. Because that just shows you how much the good guys they are.
We've seen people who claim that they're not far right, who've actually turned out to be Reform UK councillors in Epping, at the protest in Epping, actually standing with far right organisations like the Homeland Party, which is a fascist party, a Nazi party, and elsewhere we've seen a similar pattern on the hotel protests where, people have been there with Reform UK banners.
Yeah, this is part of the reason that the big guys in Reform don't turn up. You just get associated with these people, and why give them free ammunition? You can call them cowards for not being on the front line like people like Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch have been, but realistically, they're not going to be tarred with that brush because all of a sudden there's someone to the right of them who you can tar with that brush and everyone's focus is on. It's just political tactics. I'm sure they'd like to join in, but you can't, because then this ends up happening, and that's plastered all over The Guardian, and then it's plastered all over the BBC, and you just get smeared, and it's pointless giving them that ammunition.
And also the increase in flags being put around, not where I live in Birmingham, but parts of Birmingham, is just making it increasingly hostile.
If you think more flags of the nation being put up around, not even as you say around you, but in neighbourhoods means that they effectively make them no-go zones for you, perhaps you're in the wrong country. You sound like you've grown up in Birmingham, to be quite honest with you, so I don't understand why you'd feel, well, threatened, for lack of a better term, by locals putting up flags of the nation. Sort your outlook out, or maybe this country isn't for you, simple as. We are more than welcoming to people who have the mindset of, that flag represents me, and that flag is not a threat. If you take it that way, usually it's because thugs are carrying it and threatening you. However, I don't think that's ever happened before.
I don't think that raising flags is necessarily something that they're doing out of patriotism. It's definitely something to make people feel like myself as a black woman, or other people of ethnic minorities feel unwelcome in their hometowns or places that they're coming to when they're fleeing war, persecution, famine and such things, as many people that come here are.
I mean, yes, it's a misunderstanding at this point of what the people crossing the channel actually are. No, 90% of them, economic migrants, are only here for economic reasons. They are not here fleeing war. In fact, they are told to lie by the people who bring them over, and they pay to bring them over. And again, I don't see the Raise the Colours campaign as a racial thing. In fact, there's been plenty... In fact, I even saw it on TikTok. There were people saying, oh, I'm from Jamaica and I'm from Poland. Could I join you in raising these flags because I'm from near here? And they say, yeah, of course you can. I'm not seeing this as a racial thing. You are taking it as one. As I say, sort your mindset out. You can actually do it. You can just change your mind.
And the UK is actually complicit in a lot of the reasons why people are coming over to the UK. And I think that people are just being sold a lot of the garbage that is coming out of Nigel Farage's mouth, BBC, all of the mainstream media are just turning people against each other, when actually the working class needs to come together and unite against these billionaires, millionaires that are just looking out for themselves and their friends who are in corporations.
I'll just let her play that out. And once again, I mean, calling the BBC right wing is wild. They're still making George Floyd documentaries, by the way. You cannot call them right wing. That's just ridiculous. And again, it's the conflation of, oh, Nigel Farage seems to be on the news all the time. Yeah, that's because he keeps putting himself on the news by constantly announcing things and saying what their policy is because they're top of the polls. Pretty much everyone's in the mindset of, yeah, they're probably going to be in power in 2029, assuming there's no economic crisis that causes an early election. You never know. But this woman's just... It's the diatribe with everyone in Stand Up to Racism. They all know the lines. They all repeat them. I don't think an awful lot of them really think beyond the average NPC response. I don't think these people can think dynamically. I don't think they've ever had to before. Frankly, because they're very comfortable. And again, very middle-class woman saying she represents the working class. Nah. Not having it.
There's a lot of young people in there, young men, young women. Why do you think that is?
I feel like they feel like there's no hope with the current system, and they're just probably not doing their own research into what's actually causing probably the issues that they're facing. Like a lot of young people can't find accommodation, struggling to find work, probably went to university and found that they're actually not getting the jobs that they were promised. So they're looking for an answer, and the one that's being presented to them, if they just follow mainstream media, is that Nigel Farage is going to be the answer to their concerns and worries.
Again, no, the mainstream has been against this basically their entire lives. Literally their entire lives it's been right-wing are bad, right-wing are terrible, Sensible's back in the room now that Starmer's back in, and now they've turned on him because it turns out, no, he's completely useless. And, oh, left-wing politics or left-wing policies? Yeah, we've actually had them for ages, and they suck. And they are still trying to push on this, even though, like, Sky's improving, sure, but they're still instinctively left-wing. And, these young people, they're not listening to the Daily Tea. They're not reading the Daily Express. They're getting their news mostly from online. I watch this stuff on TikTok and all that. It's still full of leftists. That's why majority of people under 25 vote either the Greens or Labour, though it's probably moving over to Greens these days, or hell, even Jeremy Corbyn. Like 10% of them vote Reform. Sorry, but to say that the mainstream is right-wing and that's only affected 10% of young people, that does not follow whatsoever. We're still in a left-wing paradigm in the media. They are improving, though, which is part of the reason I don't think we'll have a Charlie Kirk incident in Britain, by the way. I don't think we're anywhere near as polarised as America, and I'd hate to be proved wrong on that. I really would.
I think the reality is that they have wide appeal amongst a range of demographics. All this is built on the fact British politics is in a huge crisis. And that crisis has emerged because for 15 years, the Conservative Party subjected the country to a political regime which held down wages, slashed wages, kept wages very low. In that time, housing costs have massively spiralled. The economy's done very badly.
All that is true, by the way, and Labour were supposed to be the answer to that, and guess what? They never were. Crazy. Oh, well, all this stuff we've been doing for 15 years, it's not working. Oh, Labour have come in and doing the same thing. Oh, Reform are coming in and saying do something different. We don't want that. No, keep the status quo. That's effectively what he's saying here, which is hilarious.
And so on a whole number of measures, the quality of life of ordinary working people has really reduced and spiralled down, and this creates massive bitterness.
He's not actually wrong there, but the problem is that all of his solutions are effectively come down to, right, you know what we had? We want that, but worse. That's effectively his solution, whereas obviously Nigel Farage's solution is, all that stuff we have? Yeah, we're gonna do a bit of a reset on that. Get rid of the ECHR, get out of international conventions that are stopping us deporting people, etc., etc., etc. And that's just on immigration. When it comes to economics, I'm hoping for big things, especially with Zia Youssef as head of policy.
Normally you would look for a left pole to find expression for that bitterness, but the Labour Party is disintegrating daily. You see today Angela Rayner resigning. This is just the latest of a long downward spiral. I mean, it really started when the right wing of the Labour Party moved against Jeremy Corbyn.
Again, it's funny to think about because over on the Worcester Club, we went through Jeremy Corbyn's 2017 and 2019 manifesto, and we kept spotting things that Boris Johnson actually brought in. It's a lot like Theresa May with the energy price cap. That was never in the manifesto for the Tories under Theresa May, and she brought it in anyway. And that was an Ed Miliband promise. Kind of crazy that all this stuff has been happening, that actually, yeah, Cthulhu has swam left to steal a Curtis Yarvinism. And ultimately, I do believe that can be stopped. This guy, though, he's saying, oh no, I want to put a propeller on the back of Cthulhu and keep him moving left radically, despite the fact that as he's swum left, it's got worse. But this is a man who thinks that you've broken 99 eggs and not made an omelette. The 100th one is definitely going to make the omelette.
And you're left now with a rump, really, of Labour Party, which has turned into a fairly right-wing party, actually.
A fairly right-wing party is still to the left of all the things that the Tories have done for the past 15 years, by the way. Still to the left of them. Bills are only getting higher, public spending's only getting higher, they're having to tax more because the public spending's getting higher. It's ridiculous to say that they're moving right. They kind of are on immigration, but that's again to try and undermine Nigel Farage, and basically nobody seems to be buying it.
So there is no expression for people who are prepared to fight for working class interests, and Reform UK essentially are filling that. It's a fake party.
This is very funny because my experience with canvassing and leafleting with other people in Reform is that I'm frankly the middle class person with a load of working class people. It's quite funny because we've gone to, I've canvassed in what a lot of people call posh areas, and all I think is, oh, I grew up in a place not dissimilar to this. With people saying, God, I've never seen so many Porsches. Oh, there's a lot of that. And I'm just thinking, oh, this is normal for me. It's quite a wake-up call for me, really. I did not have a normal upbringing, and it's made me appreciate that somewhat. But this is to make the point of, Yeah, this isn't a party for millionaires. This is a party that at the grassroots is working class and seems to represent the working class more than people who go on panels telling you what the working class think, who talk like this and do have very proper and correct pronunciations of all the words they say and try and tell you as it is, of course. In reality, I don't think any of these people have even interacted with the people I've been interacting with for the past year, so take that as you will.
Nigel Farage was saying that he hopes that Reform will win a general election as soon as 2027. How does that make you feel?
I hope not. I'd feel really uncomfortable in this country if that was to happen. It would just give more ammunition to the more violent, far-right people in this country.
It's just very obvious to me that these people do not actually listen to the right wing whatsoever. I'm sorry, but a lot of people who are rubbing their hands together for civil war are having a go about reform because effectively they're giving yet another political option. These are people, by the way, who, they'll say things like, oh, the right need to learn how to fight. Oh, get some legal weaponry, I guess. We need to go to the beaches and deal with this problem themselves. And they'll basically never leave their houses to actually do anything like that. These are people that haven't even gone to any of the protests. I know sometimes I get people saying back, yeah, well, do you do any of that? Well, no, but I'm not the one advocating for civil war, am I? I'm advocating for the political solution and actually working toward that.
Where I live, I've heard about women who are Muslim being accosted outside the park near where I live already. This is just going to increase if reform come into power. And actually, a lot of the things that he wants to introduce, if you actually look at his manifesto, a lot of it's a load of nonsense, but he actually wants to sell off the NHS.
The whole thing about Muslim women being accosted, I don't particularly get surprised when I hear that. Do I believe it? I don't see why not. I don't see why not to take her at her word. Has she heard about that? Yeah, I believe that. Did it actually happen? I've no idea. But I wouldn't be shocked if it has happened in the Birmingham area. But then moving on, if you actually look at the manifesto, it's crazy. They want to sell the NHS. Nothing like that in the manifesto. You've just made that up.
He doesn't want to do anything to protect the rights of working class people from this country. I don't see how people can't see that someone like him, that used to be a banker, is not out for them.
No, he was a metals trader, not a banker. But to these people, it doesn't really matter. Oh, they move things around for money. That's bad. Again, it's kind of amazing. Throughout the history of Marxism, it's actually been very rare that the leader of the Marxist movement have been people from working class families. Marx came from semi-aristocratic background. Engels' father owned a factory. Lenin's family were firmly middle class. There's examples that go against this, obviously. Mao Zedong came from a peasant family. But I just really hate class analysis anyway. It's complete Marxist claptrap, and it's very rare that you can generalise an entire class's political beliefs. Especially at this point in time, age seems to be the biggest indicator now. Why is that? Social media and teaching.
Obviously, they're officially a political party, but I don't think they truly have legitimate policies. It's both based on a cult of personality around Farage.
Well, that's a bit of a non sequitur, but it's so odd how the far left here and the far right seem to have the exact same arguments. Is it a one-man band? Sort of. They're moving away from it. Do they have policy? Yes. Obviously. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not legitimate. You never hear this from right-wingers when they talk about left-wing politics. They say, oh, that is serious policy, but it's going to end absolutely horribly. The left never seems to say that about the right. It's, oh, that's not legitimate policy. Why? Oh, it's illegal. Right, you know, Parliament can change the law, right?
And then it's about reverting to really kind of conservative values in terms of racism, sexism.
The famous conservative values of racism and sexism. Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're very far past these types of accusations.
Inside, they were saying that they're not racist, they're just concerned about the asylum system. What do you make of that?
I think that people who are actually concerned about the asylum system are focused on finding actual legal routes for people who are actually in need to seek asylum.
Yeah, we had that for Ukraine, Hong Kong and Afghanistan, and people didn't really complain about that until it turned out the Afghanistan one massively grew to hundreds of thousands of people rather than 10,000 or something like that, and was kept secret from us. People actually don't mind safe and legal route, but you obviously can't have that for the entire planet. You need to be very selective, and we were. And when we were, it actually worked rather well. In fact, a bit too well, because the Ukrainians ended up coming over here and basically kept asking, why the hell is it so diverse? I don't like it. Which, if anything, is a testament to how tolerant Britain actually is, to be quite honest with you.
The thing that holds them together, the glue that holds all their various members together, and their policies is racism. This is a party which is really built on racism.
It's very funny having had a year of a brown and Muslim chairman in Zia Yusuf, having basically filtered out actual racists from the party, and it's still not good enough for these people, and it never will be, and nobody's under the impression that it won't. The reason Zia Yusuf was put in his position, quite clearly, was to take a bit of a risk, for a complete political amateur, frankly, to try and basically be an entrepreneur in the political space. And it seems to have paid off in dividends, given that they're winning everything.
Farage himself is deeply, he's got a long history of being an extreme racist.
Go on then, this will be good.
Farage yesterday, I think it was, the day before he was in the US, saying the most ridiculous extremist things. One of the things he said was that Islam is destroying the United Kingdom.
No, he didn't. He was saying that Islamophobia laws and definitions in government are a disaster for free speech, etc. Farage very much distinguishes himself against the counter-jihad movements that seems to be absolutely full of people that see Muslims as a monolith, despite the fact that Muslims fight each other all the time and quite clearly aren't a monolith.
You know, this is not mainstream normal politics. This is the politics of hate and bigotry and division.
Nah, sorry, this has been relatively normal politics for ages and what people have voted for ages. We're just now getting a party that looks like they'll actually do something about it now.
What they're offering aren't solutions for ordinary people at all. You know, they're solutions for the wealthy, and they Reform UK just exists to divide people.
Well, there you go. I had absolutely no expectations for these leftists, and they absolutely reached them. Nothing much more to say on that. All NPCs. Let's move on to the Reform members.
Wealth tax or no wealth tax?
It's a very hard one. I mean, I come from a working class town. I mean, everything in kind of Reform's policies would kind of be maybe leaning more towards no wealth tax.
Well, to be fair, it depends what you mean, actually. The Britannia card, pay $250,000 as a one-off landing fee, and then, yeah, you don't get taxed on your income abroad. Kind of a wealth tax, but nobody wants to call it that because everyone knows that what a wealth tax really is, oh, you see all the assets you own? We're taking 2% of it. Do you know what that funds, by the way? That funds about 2 months of the NHS. It's not exactly the magic bullet that the left want you to think it is. It brings in like 41 billion or something like that. It doesn't even cover the amount that we're paying on interest payments for loans at the moment. Plus, we've just had figures that there's 0.0% growth in the economy. You need a complete restructuring.
No wealth tax, because I think a lot of people in the country who have worked very, very hard, the majority of the tax is paid by a very small percentage of people that are wealthy. And why are we consistently banging down on the people that who are earning a lot of money? I'm all about fairness.
To be absolutely fair on the wealth tax, it is a wealth tax and not an income tax. I mean, higher end income tax is just absolutely ridiculous. If you are between 100,000 and 120,000 on payee, the income tax calculator, I guess you could call it, or scheme from the government anyway, you are actually taxed more than if you're on 125,000 and take home less money. So it gets to a point where if the employer doesn't want to quite give you 125,000, you say, oh, can you pay me 100,000 and put the rest into the pension? Which, to be honest, isn't a bad idea in and of itself anyway, but that's all to avoid tax, which you could call tax avoidance. But when it comes to wealth, that's actually making people pay based on their assets, including their house, any companies they own, etc., etc. Problem with that, how the hell do you even determine what wealth is at that point? You have a housing crash tomorrow, all of a sudden, you know, if you paid your wealth tax just before a market crash, you're going to be really annoyed because you should have paid like 10% less than you did the day before. And in fact, you might not even be considered for a wealth tax after that as well.
Oh, no wealth tax. So one of the things that I really object to about wealth taxes, I love so a free man is somebody who doesn't owe anything to anyone, right?
I suppose in the Randian concept, yes, but we're very much getting into the abstract that doesn't really exist. But go on, I'm listening.
Own your house, if you have your food supply sorted out, if you can defend yourself, you're free. A wealth tax creates a situation where every year you have to give the government some money, even if you haven't earned anything, and that means you're not free.
I mean, how is this just not an extension of taxation as theft? This isn't a great argument against wealth tax, to be honest with you. Well, there was no point bringing up the whole natural law abstract idea thing. But yes, having to pay money even when you make a loss is quite ridiculous. You should obviously only be paying tax when you make a profit, if you even want to tax profit. Because yeah, if you make a loss, you're not going to be paying tax, because that's ridiculous.
Eventually, the state will come for you and take your stuff, right? And if you can't give them that money, then they'll use force to seize your wealth.
Yeah, this guy's arguing that all taxation is theft. This is a real libertarian guy. I don't really know where he's going with this.
So I view a wealth tax as a fundamental threat to freedom itself. I don't think you can be free if there's a tax on your house.
I mean, I have my issues with the land value tax, but I wouldn't say that my freedom's gone if I have to pay a land value tax, which is kind of a wealth tax, but specifically on the land that you own. So if you own a house, you'd pay a land value tax based on the value of the land that you are on, which is based on, I don't know what, I can't remember. I've not looked at land value tax for some time. The wealth tax, though, that becomes a lot more complicated because obviously if you do it with a business, well, how do you quantify how much a business is worth? Well, it's based on the stock price of the day. Well, that changes all the time depending on the business, and therefore the value of your shares go up and down all the time. So, you know, do you average it out over the past 6 months? Do you base it off a trajectory it's going? How is it possibly fair?
I think left and right sort of overlap in that they kind of see a similar problem with wealth inequality. So,
oh, not me. No, I'm very much in the flag planting. I don't think there's a problem with wealth inequality. I think the problem is that, yeah, sure, wealth has gone up while wages have basically stuck where they are. I think if wages went up in proportion to wealth, I think everything would be fine, but they haven't. And I think this guy's about to go into why.
Right-wing people tend to be okay with wealth inequality on paper, and they only have an issue with it if it reaches the point where people can't afford to pay for things, right?
I mean, that's pretty much the position I'm in, yeah. Fair enough.
And so sort of left-wing people will often say, well, the rich are sort of gobbling up all the profits, you know, all the wealth that we generate is going to this sort of 1%, and we want to change how it's distributed, and their solution is taxes.
Okay, this guy's improving. Yep, that's accurate. That is what they say.
I think that because we're importing huge numbers of unnecessary workers, it's changing the balance of supply and demand and pushing the value of labour down. So Karl Marx, I mean, I'm not a communist, but Karl Marx actually made the same argument where he argued that the English capitalists would import Irish workers in order to depress the wages of the English working class, which sets up a conflict of interest between the English and Irish workers, so that breaks worker solidarity.
Yeah, and it also kind of happened. I think navvies were kind of famously Irish, but they were still only a minority. Most navvies, the people who, you know, dug trenches and tunnels for railways, were like 90% English. But obviously you're building so much track. You had an explosion of trains in the 19th century that they were still, you know, it would have looked like destitution to us, sure, but they were still probably paid better than most other working class jobs.
And it means that the capitalist class can extract a higher percentage of the profits for themselves at the expense of the workers.
Yes, well done. He nailed everything there. No notes.
Sounds like you're saying that foreign workers to Britain and the white working class should unite against their capitalist bosses.
Well, no, I think they have other things. I think their interests separate. Their interests conflict in other ways, which are more significant.
Nice save. It's more the corporations that are doing this rather than your average capitalist small business. Realistically, if you didn't have mass migration going on for so long, they would have just accelerated towards R&D and automation, which is happening, by the way, anyway. So this is the type of problem you'll probably see sorting out anyway.
But it is certainly the case that the capitalists use imported labour as a way of depressing worker wages. So, yes.
And then, ironically, we keep putting minimum wage up and up and up, and that causes wage compression. We're basically at a point where you'll have an easier time working as a shelf monkey in a supermarket or something like that, earning slightly less than if you were working full-time in a professional setting where the stress goes through the roof. It's just not worth the money.
So the issue is with wealth tax. I don't agree with a wealth tax. I think Reform's policy of sort of taxing people who want to, or charging like a flat fee of 250k, people who want to invest overseas is a great policy.
Yeah, it'll certainly at least stifle the exit of wealth from the country, which, you know, I'm just saying that's happened. Now we've got no growth whatsoever, probably related.
The issue is with a wealth tax, it sounds good on paper, but really what you'll do is you'll just push millionaires and billionaires to move their assets offshore and stuff.
Yeah, that's happened pretty much everywhere there has been one. Spain, I think, is quite a famous example of it, and there are different countries that try it in different ways, but the way a lot of the English, or British, I suppose, lefties are trying to push it is 2% for everything over 10 million or whatever, which it usually doesn't go up to 2%. I think the only place that does is Spain, and it's the worst example of it. But at least 10 million is actually a ridiculous amount of wealth. But again, it's hypermobile. You just throw it out the country and not get taxed on it.
And it discourages people from investing into the UK, which is what we crucially need. The more investment we get from millionaires and billionaires, the more we can relieve tax on the working class. Because the truth is, whether you like it or not, the richest in the society pay the most tax.
Oh yeah, it's not even close. The amount of people who say, oh, you know, the rich don't pay any tax at all, they misconstrue them avoiding tax and saving, I don't know, let's say it's $1 million each or something like that, with not paying tax at all. They'll still pay £9 million in tax or something ridiculous. And it's an argument that the left should not get away with, but I've seen them get away with it for years. It's crazy.
But I think also the party has some positive messages to do with tax. I really like the idea of increasing the tax threshold to £20,000 a year. And I think it's those sorts of less conspicuous facets of the party and policies of the party that go unnoticed, and I think that those should be looked into more by more people, and I think that will attract more people to the party.
I mean, that is quite a good counter to it. What do you think of a wealth tax? Well, no, I don't think you need one. On the other hand, how are they helping working people anyway? Oh, well, you know, you've got the Britannia card, which will give working people some money. Completely linked, by the way, with the amount of billionaires that come over here to pay the $250,000 when they land. And also, yeah, the tax that is affecting pretty much all working class people now. The threshold for income tax, that at the moment is like 12,500 and has been frozen there for years. And with fiscal drag, everyone now pays that. Put that up to 20,000, yeah, that's going to save a lot of people a lot of money.
You need wealth creators in order to have employment and successful businesses in this country, and if we drive them away, then there will be fewer opportunities for other people to progress as well.
Oh, trickle-down economics, I don't care. Yeah, he's correct. Like, based, yes, thank you. Very Thatcherite.
So, for me, if the wealth tax was possible, I'm at a stage in my politics where I would actually support it.
Boo, kick him out of the party. No, I'm joking. Go ahead. I mean, if I get a whiff of Gary Stevenson, I'm going to go mental.
Because I think life is a lottery ticket in many ways, you know. Like, for instance, if you're depressed, how are you meant to succeed in life? You have such a disadvantage to so many people.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure what this has to do with the wealth tax. Again, it's worth pointing out over 90% of our millionaires are self-made. Generational wealth at this point kind of doesn't exist.
If you've gone to private school, if you don't have parents who love you, like, I was blessed, I didn't grow up rich, but my parents loved me.
Yep, there are some people who get early advantages in life, you are absolutely correct. But we also clearly have many examples of social mobility actually working. And it slowed down in recent years, yet again because the left have been getting the policies they wanted. Just saying.
Why are you, like, flaunting your wealth? It's because you don't feel loved or you want to be loved. And some people don't have love. They have no one looking out for them. And I think that affects life so much.
I've got absolutely no idea why he's in favour of a wealth tax. What was that? Some people are rich and they flaunt it. Yeah, I think it's cringe too. But people flaunt wealth is a pretty ridiculous reason to want a wealth tax. That is pure politics of envy. Anyway, Politics Joe ran into a farmer who was obviously very much against the inheritance tax, which in and of itself is a type of wealth tax. It's just applied when you die.
I think they're not cash rich. I think what they are is they have assets that are buildings. A combine harvester might cost $250,000 or more, 500 grand. As soon as you start having some outhouses with real estate prices now increasing, it looks like on paper there's a lot of asset value. But if you have to dispense with that when someone dies, then £1 million or £3 million is not that much. What it actually does as well, people have already started shutting down or going out, saying we just can't continue.
And this is just a wealth tax in reality. What happens? It just sucks for everyone. It's an even worse situation with inheritance tax because it's just a grief tax. You know, you're already in grief, and then all of a sudden the government comes over to pinch some more money that's already been taxed. And then one of two things happen. In my experience anyway, either the money's completely wasted or the money is invested into, you know, doing up a house. Hell, unfortunately my grandmother died last year, inheritance has come through. Guess what it's being spent on? Half it for a holiday, the other half is being put into the house to make improvements. Very rarely does anyone get cash and basically puts it in a big vault just like Scrooge McDuck. Nobody does that. Anyway, in the actual video, the guy has a lot more to say on it, but it's ground that one, I've covered before, and two, doesn't really add to the situation. As it turns out, when it comes to the we're going to interview Reform members, it's to talk about the wealth tax, which, as it turns out, has been a bit of a waste of time, but hell, we're near the end now, so I may as well finish it.
Wealth tax is driving away wealthy people. Without wealthy people, there is nothing for people in the country, and
Probably a little bit far. It's not quite as fixed as that, but it is absolutely true. Especially inheritance tax is cited quite a reason for a lot of wealthy people to move away. Generally, yes, they are wealth creators. Not all of them will be necessarily fine, but ultimately, why would people aspire to get to a point where they feel like they want to leave the country? That seems stupid, doesn't it?
then the poor people who are left have to pay more tax.
Yeah, that is true as well.
Tax is important, but it shouldn't be blown out of the water. You need rich people in this country to pay tax, because if they go, then massive lot of tax gets cut from us, and then we have to pay more.
If you want examples of why, all these people saying Reform is actually left-wing and things like that, these are effectively points that, basically everyone in Reform, top to bottom, believes. They believe in some sort of hierarchy, and in this case, there's a wealth one. Now, can it be blown out of the water and get really bad? Maybe. I'm not entirely convinced by it. But should the country effectively encourage people who are at the bottom to be able to travel to the top, or at least travel upwards? Yes, absolutely. I am for that. And I advocate that. If people at the bottom have no chance of getting to the top, is that necessarily bad? I don't know. Maybe. I'm open to it. And the minutiae of these questions will probably be different when it comes to the answers from individual members of the party, but ultimately, all of them understand that yes, there is actually a hierarchy. And in that case, that makes Reform right-wing, and I'm fine with that.
And also, they usually run businesses, they pay us to work, right? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's good to see that Reform members generally are on the side of wealth is good and having wealthy people is good, and usually means that you can actually grow an economy. So I am very happy to see that. It's just a shame that that's what Politics Joe decided was interesting, but this is why we take a look, because it turns out the left really are on the push to get this wealth tax done, and it's absolutely ridiculous. But with that, I think I will leave it there. So, in terms of shilling, Tosh News on Tuesday, Hollow Knight, the final one, next Thursday. Saturday it is Laughing at the Guardian with some whamming, and of course videos out as and when I can make them. And then the week after, I am off. You won't have anything from me. I won't even be on Twitter. I need a social media break because I don't think I've ever actually had one. And it would be good to live in the real world, I suppose, for once in my life. Anyway, I think with that, as I say, that is everything I had for you for today. So, once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.